got into publishing because as a freelance writer, I kept finding opportunities to sell those skills to people who wound up wanting to do books with what I wrote for them. And I took several books through the entire publishing passage and became simply enamored of the process and decided I wanted to do more of it and not for somebody else. Oh, that's a very interesting question because I think at first I assumed, even though I had experience working with creating teaching presses as part of grade school and high school curriculum, that when I went out into the world of university publishing programs, I would see some examples of publishing presses actually integrated into the curriculum. And unfortunately, there were none. So that was the first big surprise. It was that we'd have to make all of the mistakes ourselves. And we've done that. We've made most of them at this point. So that was the thing that I was probably most bothered by at the beginning. What I've been most satisfied by is the way that we have managed to invent a really deep collaboration that's supportive of so many people and trains people so broadly that for the most part, those going through the program are years ahead of me at the same stage in the development of themselves as publishers. And I didn't expect it to be that good. I thought it would be solid, but it surprised me at how well it has worked. There was a group of students at the beginning, 8 of them in a seminar, and one of the tasks we had was to figure out what kind of press we would be starting. There was nothing. We were starting from scratch. That included what kind of name, and so we tossed around the different sensibilities that we wanted. We knew we wanted to connect it with the region in some way. We wanted to connect it with the natural and cultural history of the region. So it sounded to us like a name that came from native experience would be good, but we didn't have one. One of the women in the class who was in the technical writing program at the time had read an article in the Oregon Historical Society Quarterly, or the Southern Historical Society Quarterly, one of them, that was on the origins of the word Oregon. It was done by 2 young Native American anthropologists at the U of O. David Lewis is one of them, and he's still around. He's the cultural director for the Grand Ronde Confederation near Portland here. They had put forward the thesis that all of the white guys, all of the Anglos, all of those anthropologists had been wrong. They said nobody has ever asked our grandparents, our tribes, where the name came from. So they did that. They asked. And their grandparents and aunts and uncles came back all with the same story, which was that the common smelt, that we also know as the candlefish, was one of the trade resources for all of the Northwest Coast tribes, from Alaska down past the mouth of the Columbia, up the Columbia past Celilo Falls, and that common smelt, known as the Ooligan or Ulichin in Chinookan dialect, was a trade commodity. For over 1,000 years, there were trails that were used to transport the oils as a commodity all the way to the Great Lakes. They were known as grease trails because the cedar boxes that they would carry on their backs with this cold oil would regularly break, people trip, and the trails after 1,000 years were pretty greasy, probably fell down even more. But when the term crossed the Continental Divide, it went from the Chinookan jargon, where there was an L, and they said Ooligan, to the Athabascan and Assiniboine jargons, where there was no L, and where it was replaced with an R and became Oregon. It's a great fish story. Whether or not it's the absolute truth or not, we liked it a lot, and it satisfied those other needs for connections with the place. As a mentor and as a facilitator, and then as someone who stands out of the way and lets people do their best work and discover themselves. It's really about enabling and creating opportunities, making sure that the lessons of experience get transmitted, but not trying to jam students into narrow notions of what it is to be a publisher, or even what the possibilities might be as things change. So is to be a teacher, but it's also to be a compatriot, a colleague, even from the beginning. I think the rapid increase in size was one of the things that changed that surprised me, but it was also the acceptance of the general community, including the general book trade, of an experiment like this, and the really deep support that we've gotten. I thought that we would be another program. I didn't think that we would become, in a sense, the program internationally. We're the go-to place now for how you teach publishing. Well, my vision is less important now than sort of what we have created and what the university decides they'll do with it after I retire. If I had a vision that could be applied to it, it would be that there was the hiring of a stronger full-time staff with somebody in every position, editing, design, and marketing, as well as running the press and running the program. And while I love the reliance on people who are working in the field, they can only give so much and be available so much of the time. They're extraordinarily generous, but they should be on full-time, or more of them should be. So that's where I would see that going. I would like to see it being properly supported by the university and the community in terms of resources. So that's not just staff, but it's better funding, a more predictable budgetary model, and opportunities for students to not have to pay for everything they do, but actually have more money for graduate assistance, for travel, for the sorts of things that you would normally expect a graduate program to have. I suppose the biggest learning experience was that I had to be a marketer. And it was not what I came into publishing to be. I think most people who arrive at the doorsteps of publishing think of it as driven by editing and writing. And in fact, those are the things that you want to do and do well. But it means nothing if you can't find the audiences for the books. And I had to get over the notion that I wasn't a salesperson and learn how to do that. But when you believe in your products, when you believe in the books and the authors, that turns out to be pretty easy, and so I got over it. So that was probably the biggest surprise. In the industry itself, the biggest frustration has been the loss of independent bookstores. And that was a loss that came about because they were driven out of business by the superstores and the big box stores. New media offers small presses, and actually large too, a way around the problem of the loss of the bookstores. But for a short period of time, that was a calamity that really, really compromised American literary culture. It eliminated all of the experimentation because everything had to go to the common denominator of the superstores. Now the superstores are in trouble because ebooks are changing the footing of the small guys. We'll come back. Oh, I have so many, and they all have to do with watching students thrive, do exceptional projects, portfolios that blow my mind, and then leave to find jobs, not just in publishing, but in all realms of communication and all over the world. There are over 250 students who have graduated now, and while I don't feel paternalistic, there is a sense in which I feel like I've done something. I've helped people to go out in the world and to make change, to have an impact on ideas and on literature. And I can't predict what that would be. And some people will go into the most blindly, overtly commercial kinds of publishing, and others will go into publishing for its own art, for its own sake. All of those work, but it's knowing that we've done this together. It isn't just me, but maybe I've been a catalyst to enabling people to go out and take those risks, and other people will benefit from that, not just them. That's the satisfaction. Borrow enough money at the beginning. And I'm not being facetious, really. One of the problems that small presses have, and independent publishers in general, is not having the capital adequate to the task. Run into a good book and you need to print more and you can't do it. Partly the changes, the new media changes, being that that's less and less of a problem. But that was one of the things that I did wrong early on, and I would have saved myself a world of grief and would have had a profitable publishing house probably in half the time if I had just committed to borrowing the money when I needed it to get everything in place and to be able to work at the profession without having the distraction of going off and doing other kinds of work to supplement income. In the long run, we wound up borrowing just as much, but it took longer.